Please like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the videos. People of Reddit, what's an interesting creepy topic to look into? Go watch the documentary 3 Identical Strangers. A story about triplets who were separated at birth. It starts out wholesome and very quickly becomes dark. Even more horrific is this documentary about David Reimer, who was turned into a girl at birth while his twin brother was not. And the doctor who did it was a weirdo pervert who made the twin boys do weird things naked as part of the experiment. The Nazino Affair, aka Cannibal Island. Back in the 30s, some bigwigs in the USSR wanted to do what amounted to a collectivization experiment on an unsettled island, so they rounded up 6,000 mostly randomly snatched up city folk and dumped them on an undeveloped island with almost no food or supplies or shelter, with guards stationed around the island ordered to shoot anyone who tried to leave. Within 3 months, roughly 2/3 RDS of the island's population was dead, with many of the survivors resorting to eating the dead, and in some stories, butchering still living people. Eventually, the experiment was deemed a failure and they removed the survivors off the island, and records about the experiment got buried until the 1980s. They were trying to escape. They asked us, where's the railway? We'd never seen a railway. They asked, where's Moscow? Leningrad? They were asking the wrong people, we'd never heard of those places. We're Ostayaks. People were running away starving. They were given a handful of flour. They mixed it with water and drank it, and then they immediately got diarrhea. The things we saw. People were dying everywhere, they were killing each other. On the island there was a guard named Kostya Venikov, a young fellow. He fell in love with a girl who had been sent there and was courting her. He protected her. One day he had to be away for a while, and he told one of his comrades, take care of her, but with all the people there the comrade couldn't do much really. People caught the girl, tied her to a poplar tree, cut off her breasts, her muscles, everything they could eat, everything. They were hungry, they had to eat. When Kostya came back, she was still alive. He tried to save her, but she had lost too much blood. NASA has radio transmission made by every planet in our solar system, essentially giving the planet sounds. Saturn screams. Cornflakes. The inventor of cornflakes made it bland and boring so people wouldn't get excited and have sex or masturbate. He also ran a sanitarium, put carbolic acid on little girls' privates so they would never derive pleasure from sex, and put wires on boys' penises so that when they had an erection it would cause them pain. Among other things. He believed in some crazy crap. One of Kellogg's heroes was Mr. Graham, known for the Graham cracker. He thought tasty food excited the loins and led to sexual thoughts. The original Graham cracker was invented to prevent masturbation, by tasting so bland. The wife of the leader of the Church of Scientology has not been seen for over 10 years. The higher-ups of the organization claim she is dedicating all her time to the church, but the fact that ever since she got in a big fight with her husband 10 years ago, none of her family members had seen or contacted her indicates foul play. Cults. It's easy to think you're too smart to fall for brainwashing tactics, but the more you learn, the more you realize that we all have vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Room 1046 is a pretty creepy unsolved case. Basically, an unidentified man was brutally murdered in his hotel room after he had been sat there, alone, in the dark, all day. Throw in some mysterious phone calls and strange behaviors and it's a pretty interesting story. A Redditor, when she was young, and her mom were out camping and there were men in a truck nearby. Later that night, she was awoken by her mom in the tent who was sitting up and motioning for her to be quiet. They could hear the men approaching the tent. The mom had a bit of quick thinking and said, "Tommy, grab the gun," aloud, even though it was just the girl and her mom. The men ended up leaving after hearing that. I can't imagine the horrors they avoided that night. I had a really creepy man come to my door once. I was home with my first son, who was a week and a half old. So I was understandably exhausted and pretty vulnerable feeling. He asked some questions about someone he said used to live in my house and left. Then he came back, and asked more questions asking if my husband was home. Why, because usually under stress I say the wrong shit, but in that moment I said, yeah, he is in the shower, but he'll be out in a second, then yelled, "Babe, someone is here to talk to you," and he started fumbling over his words and left. It was creepy as fuck. There was another one about a trucker who stopped off at a motel one night and despite the weird vibes he got from the clerk and the overall condition of the place, decided to retire for the night. When at 2:30 or so, there were noises from 2 men breaking into the room. The trucker leaps out of bed into the bathroom and hides in the shower, praying they don't walk in as they rummage through. When they leave, he books it running to his truck, and off to the next place. When asking about the crummy place, he was told that it shut down years earlier. Elon School. Basically, this school was a pseudo-cult / Stanford prison experiment type place disguised as a send-away school for behavior correction. There is a webcomic series by someone who escaped. I'm on break at work, else I'd link it. It's since closed, but it went for under the radar for years and years. A few people died there from the harsh treatments they were given. Definitely the tale of that guy who died in the Nutty Putty cave upside down, unable to be rescued, as it would have involved breaking his legs. Never thought I'd get creeped out by an infographic, but here you go. I like to go back and read the threads where Redditors talk about their creepiest moments. From seeing something that shouldn't exist to almost being killed by something super tangible, it's just interesting and creepy to read people's first-hand experiences of fear. Zhejiang Jiangxi campaign, which was led by the Japanese as a revenge for the Dolittle raid. Here is what Wikipedia says about it. After the raid, the Japanese Imperial Army began the Zhejiang Jiangxi campaign, also known as Operation Seigo, to prevent these eastern coastal provinces of China from being used again for an attack on Japan and to take revenge on the Chinese people. An area of some 20,000 square miles, 50,000 square kilometers, was laid waste. Like a swarm of locusts, they left behind nothing but destruction and chaos, eyewitness Father Wendelin Dunker wrote. The Japanese killed an estimated 10,000 Chinese civilians during their search for Doolittle's men. People who aided the airmen were tortured before they were killed. Father Dunker wrote of the destruction of the town of Aiwang. They shot any man, woman, child, cow, hog, or just about anything that moved. They raped any woman from the ages of 10 to 65, and before burning the town they thoroughly looted it. None of the humans shot were buried either. The Japanese entered Nanchang, population 50,000 on June 11, beginning a reign of terror so horrendous that missionaries would later dub it the Rape of Nanchang, evoking memories of the infamous rape of Nanjing 5 years before. Less than a month later, the Japanese forces put what remained of the city to the torch. This planned burning was carried on for 3 days, one Chinese newspaper reported, and the city of Nanchang became charred earth. When Japanese troops moved out of the Zhejiang and Jiangxi areas in mid-August, they left behind a trail of devastation. Chinese estimates put the civilian death toll at 250,000. The Imperial Japanese Army had also spread cholera, typhoid, plague-infected fleas and dysentery pathogens. The Japanese Biological Warfare Unit 731 brought almost 300 pounds of paratyphoid and anthrax to be left in contaminated food and contaminated wells with the withdrawal of the army from areas around Yushan, Qinhua, and Futshan. Around 1,700 Japanese troops died out of a total 10,000 Japanese soldiers who fell ill with disease when their biological weapons attack rebounded on their own forces. Shunroku Hata, the commander of Japanese forces involved of the massacre of the 250,000 Chinese civilians, was sentenced in 1948 in part due to his failure to prevent atrocities. He was given a life sentence but was paroled in 1954. It is only a small part of what war crimes Japanese committed in World War II, but nobody seemed to remember them. The true story that was the inspiration for the song Away by Fastball. It's based on Leela and Raymond Howard, a Texas couple in their 80s. They were planning to go to a festival they went to every year just 15 miles from their home, but they were both suffering from mental decline. They took off that morning without telling anyone. They never came home. 3 days later they got pulled over 500 miles away from home. Not once but twice. Neither officer was aware they were reported as missing persons at that time. They were let go with a warning, even though Leela couldn't remember where she lived. The search intensified, authorities in multiple states were looking for them, it made national news and tips came rolling in, but none led to their discovery. The early news of the search inspired the song, and it was written before they were found. Leela and Raymond were ultimately discovered by hikers a couple weeks after their disappearance. The car was at the bottom of a 25-foot cliff. Raymond was deceased in the passenger seat. Leela was deceased a short distance from the car holding her purse and car keys. She opened the passenger door for her dead husband before crawling away and dying of her own injuries. The car went off the cliff at about 50 miles per hour and there were no skid marks indicating that she even tried to stop. Presumably she didn't see the cliff or got confused or something and just drove right off it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more real-life creepy encounters around the world. See you in the next video. Bye.